Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from Hong Kong at SmartCon 2024 by Chainlink. Joining me for this segment, we have Sandra. She's the CEO of the Global Blockchain Business Council, known as GBBC. We're here to discuss how the financial industry views the adoption of blockchain technology and the gaps that need to be filled. Sandra, it is great to have you with us. Welcome to TradeTalks.
Thank you so much, Jill. Glad to be here.
All right, you got it. And what is GBBC? What's the story behind it and the founding of the organization?
So GBBC is about 8 years old now, and we launched at Davos in Switzerland back in 2017. I was a founding board director. I've been on the journey of GBBC. It started off as a nonprofit foundation association focusing on education, especially to C-suite executives and regulators and legislators around the world.
What are some of the primary initiatives for helping to develop the blockchain industry?
So some of the big initiatives that you can imagine that out the gate are financial services and really focusing on digital versions of things. So tokenization is a big one, but also digital money. But I think the world has evolved beyond that. So now we're looking at digital identity, we're looking at supply chain, we're looking at global commerce, and that things are starting to get very interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you. What other areas of industry are garnering the most attention from your members? Because this type of technology really can be applied across the board.
Absolutely, Jill. You're totally right. And even though a lot of people immediately go to cryptocurrency or they go to financial services, there's actually so much beyond that. And then financial services actually underpin a lot of that. So like I said, digital identity and digital wallets will be ubiquitous across multiple industries. We like healthcare. I think the energy sector is also starting to look very interesting. And tokenized commodities. I mean, I come from the trading side, on commodity side, and I will say, like, people are just starting to talk about metals and mining, rare metals, commodities, agriculture, and so we're going to start seeing some really interesting conversations on that front.
How do you think the financial services industry is perceiving blockchain technology, and what gaps do you think still need to be filled?
I think some people would argue that the hard pill has been swallowed by Web 2 TradFi, and that frankly most are coming along the development curve. Some more than others. I think some are obviously more innovative than others, but ultimately there is a Web 2, Web 3 crossover, and that is where groups like Chainlink are playing a critical role because we need that transition bridging.
Yeah, well, I mean, also the advocacy that GBBC is doing as well. It's no longer this conversation of this ethos versus that ethos, and it's really about the integration and, you know, the maturation of this space.
Yeah.
And helping to evolve the global capital markets. I think that's important to recognize the type of work that you're doing. So what's next for GBBC?
Absolutely, and I think the world in our conversations with regulators, with legislators, with all kinds of people, executives at the banks, the conversations are getting more sophisticated and the maturity is happening. We're not there yet. I think we're in the teenage stage. It's still a little bit awkward, it's still growing, but we're evolving. And from a GBBC standpoint, we are now squarely focusing on standards, frameworks, common language. It sounds really boring, but that is the only way any industry has ever scaled.
Well, I mean, it makes sense though. Financial services is heavily regulated. You
Yes.
can't just plug and play things without understanding what the framework looks like. So I would imagine that's the biggest challenge that you hear.
Absolutely, and then imagine marrying that with what's going on in the US versus what's going on in Europe, and looking at it at a global level. The complexity is real, but more and more people, including regulators, are having this dialogue, and I think that's very heartening to see that collaboration and constant dialogue happening.
Yeah, we have to get out of those teenage years, don't we?
Yes, let's get out of those teenage years.
All right, Sandra, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from SmartCon. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.